Welcome back to the Business of Biotech. I'm your host, Ben Comer, and I'm pleased to bring you a conversation today with David Sands, an experienced life science investment banker who knows the space from the inside out, having worked earlier in his career at companies including Novartis, Pfizer, and Mclone, among others. Now, David is leading healthcare and life sciences investing at D. Boral Capital, formerly known as EF Hutton. On today's show, we'll learn about David's somewhat unusual career path, what he's excited about in the context of life sciences investing in 2025, unique funding strategies for drug developers, and what I'll call a dynamic policy environment in the U.S. and what that could mean for the sector. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Ben. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for your audience at Business of Biotech.
We're really pleased to speak with you today, David. Your academic background includes a master's degree in chemical engineering, a PhD in molecular modeling, as well as an MBA. Professionally, unlike plenty of other leaders in the life sciences, you moved from a career in Big Pharma into, with a few stops in between, the life sciences, banking, and financial industry. That's in comparison to the reverse trajectory, which is former investors becoming biotech leaders. What can you tell us, David, about your career development and the reasons behind the path that you've chosen?
Yes, thank you, Ben. So growing up in Basel, Switzerland, I was very fortunate to have a scholarship with Novartis, and I consider basically having a long career in pharma. I was brought to the U.S. as a scientist of national interest. And things changed rapidly. When I came to the US, I started to see or expose to the startup community. And I thought it was very interesting to see how universities and different researchers were developing so many drugs. And it was a very interesting time for me when I transitioned from Big Pharma by the company called Mclone Systems. The company did very well, was acquired by Lilly in 2008 for 6.5 billion. And after that, I got this bug of going into the startup industry. And then I thought, why not going into finance first, spend a few years of learning the ropes, learning about the industry, learning the Wall Street type of industry. And I learned very quickly that I really enjoyed helping CEOs. That being on the side of Wall Street was very, very interesting, dealing with investors and trying to find diamonds in a rough and getting always ahead of on top of the new research and the new waves of technologies. And then I thought that I quickly saw that I had some value to provide to customers, both to CEOs of a small biotech companies, but also to investors. So I do enjoy a lot working with the research department of Wall Street, learning for the new trends, looking at the M&A activity in pharma. And what I saw is that in 2010, and this is something that we can continue talking about, there was what we call the patent cliff, the patent expiration, that was valued at that time of $30 billion. So if you think about 2010, we had products like Lipitor, a lower cholesterol lowering agent, was going off patent. And this was a blockbuster. Altogether, there were about 60 to 70 drugs that went off patent in 2010, with a total valuation of market sales of about 30 billion. Fast forward then in 2025, and we always measure this in 5 years, patent cliff of the next 5 years, and then the patent cliff of the next 5 years. So when we look at 2025 until 2030, we have 190 drugs going off patent with a total value sales revenues of 300 billion. So when you think about 2010, 2025, we see a tenfold increase on the number of drugs going off patent and creating a gap where we call basically the pharma industry is going to lose revenues. It's going to lose $300 billion in revenue. What that means to us is a lot of opportunities for M&A, a lot of opportunities for investors to have an exit, for CEOs of by the companies to be acquired by Big Pharma, and providing the continuity to launch drugs into the market. So, in summary, Ben, what I think that it's an extraordinary time today to be in banking is because we see these massive opportunity within the next 5, 10, 15 years of new technologies. We saw the weight lowering agents that have been very successful. So we see new technology. So just to wrap it up to your question, I started in the bench as a chemist developing one of the first tyrosine kinase inhibitors, and I went into finance, and I realized that this is a very fast-moving environment where science is unlimited. You can find science every day of the week, and I thought that being in finance probably leverages a lot of my skills, and I can help a lot more people.
So your turn into finance coincided then with that 2010 patent cliff, which I remember covering as a journalist. Everyone was talking about it at the time, and it's amazing to think, how much larger the coming patent cliff is. I'm happy you made that point. But given your previous experience as a bench scientist, how did you make that decision to try your hand in finance? I think what was a kind of new field for you at that time.
It was a new field. I went back to school at night, so I will work until 4 or 5 p.m., run into the university, get the financial studies completed, and then I took all the exams, all the SEC required exams. I think that once you go into the PhD, getting another degree and continuing your education is not that difficult, but definitely it was an effort. I mean, you have to spend a lot more time in the school, a lot more time in learning new skills and developing your skills for a complete different industry. Also, what I thought to me personally, what was more difficult is moving into from a research type of mentality to a financial services mentality. It requires a completely different skill set. When you are working with CEOs and investors and funds, you're a service provider. You are not leading a science. You are not. You basically have is a different mindset. I mean, you have to generate opportunities every day. You have to think about opportunities every day, and you need to make a lot of calls, and you need to be very active, which is the opposite in terms of science. Think about the scientific process is very quiet. You need to preserve, work on a lot of patents. You need to be very, very careful about what things you disclose, what things you don't disclose. And it's very long term and it's very binary. It works or it doesn't work. The financial industry, in terms of services, is very, very different. You have to be on the phone every day. You have to initiate conversations every day. You need to initiate ideas, and you need to basically call. You need to have a lot of velocity. Every day there are about 10, 20 stocks that move very quickly, and you need to build on that velocity. So which is a very different skill set, is a very different way of thinking about your day-to-day job, and it requires basically much longer hours and more diverse. You need to basically think about 20 things at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And I want to bring us back into 2025 here in a few minutes, but I had a couple of other questions just about your background first, David. One is that in addition to working in Big Pharma and biotech, you also worked for a time on the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, which is a large public-private partnership aimed at improving outcomes in cancer, reducing cancer deaths. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about your experience with that program?
Yes, these started in 2016. I have become very good friends with Patrick Sonchion. He's a high net worth individual with a lot of success with Immune Bio and other companies. So it was in that at that time that he wanted to basically be on the private side of the cancer moonshot. Obviously, the program has evolved very, very differently from 2016 to what it started in 2023, funding new programs. So I thought it was a great opportunity. He asked me to join at that time the committee, the Cancer Moonshot Committee. His was the early beginning of the conversations with Joe Biden after his son passed away of glioblastoma multiforme. So there was a lot of good momentum. There was a lot of aspiration. It was the sweet kind of moment of the Cancer Moonshot where everything was possible. Everybody was very excited to start. And then it took years before the policy, I imagine in 2016, it was not until 2023 that the program was funded. Now in 2025, it's very clear with the new administration has already stated that they want to defund the Cancer Moonshot Initiative. So I think that for the most part, if you think about the amount of time that took, it was a lot of involvement in terms of policy, and it had resulted only in about 2 or 3 years of activity.
Just one follow-up I want to ask you on this program, given that, it's a large national program, only funded in 2023 at, I believe, $150 million, if I'm not mistaken. Did you, I guess, thinking about, starting your work in that program and then fast forward to today, did it change your mind or give you additional thoughts about the effectiveness of a large, federal, from the top kind of program to address disease? Can they be effective? Are they sort of at the whim of changing administrations, which make them less effective? What's your kind of takeaway from, your participation in that effort?
I think that in retrospective, in hindsight, this was an idea in 2016 that basically was born out of this situation. If you think about GBM or glioblastoma, still today is a very difficult patient population. Once you have a tumor in the brain, you develop seizures, you develop a swelling of the brain. It's a very complicated disease, and every patient is different. Every tumor, every solid tumor has different epitopes, and it's difficult. It's one of the most difficult cancers to treat. And still today, there is still a small increment. I mean, you can extend life weeks, maybe months, but there has been very little in terms of real impact on treating this disease. So this initiative started really for the most difficult tumors, for the tumors that pharma does not want to get involved. If you think about, I cannot name one single big pharma company that has a GBM program. Roche used to have some programs, but were basically reduced and almost eliminated. So the Cancer Moonshot at that time had this aspiration to go after the most difficult to treat tumors that commercially may not be as attractive and have very high risk. So if you think about this equation, and that was basically the direction for the Cancer Moonshot, to create more funding for places where pharma, after NIH has done the investment, pharma doesn't want to continue because it may have very little commercial value. Fast forward, 150 million is still a small amount. I would say that the result or the impact has been not that big. But one of the things that came out of this program has been all these open label, open access type of clinical trials where there are big consortia, there are big groups that are coming together and say, oh, guys, let's put together a protocol where we can try different drugs for different patients, not just one trial per one drug. So I think that in retrospective, there has been a lot of value out of all this effort. The outcomes have been probably lower than what we expected 8 years ago. But definitely, I think there has not been a waste of it has not been a waste of efforts and results. I think there is still a very long way to go, and we have made tremendous progress with clinical trial programs that didn't exist before.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I have one more question about your background, and then we'll bring it up to 2025. I gave an abbreviated list of your various credentials just a few minutes ago, but failed to mention your FAARM designation, which I was not familiar with that designation prior to meeting you, David. And I'm hoping you could take just a couple of minutes to explain what that is to others who may not be familiar with that acronym.
Yes, there is a whole discipline of cell therapies that what we call the regenerative medicine. This is a discipline that was very hot basically a few years ago. I took all the exams in 2016 to have this board certification. And the idea is that we have done cell therapy for many years. If you think about bone marrow transplantation, that is a type of cell therapy. You take cells from one person, from a donor, and you give these cells to a patient. So the cell therapy space is not new, has been around for many, many years. We believe that as as we understand more the pathology of the disease, and we understand more how to characterize cells, there is a whole a space of cell therapies that is still not yet fully developed. That we can find these type of opportunities, and that there is basically this vertical of a specialty in medicine called regenerative medicine that is still growing. It's still being defined. The FDA has been going after a lot of these clinics that do cell therapy without the controls and without understanding. And I thought, from the pathology background, I thought it was a very interesting discipline that it needed more studies, it needed more efforts. And I'm happy that I had this window of opportunity when I was at Mount Sinai Icahn School of Medicine to have this opportunity to have this board certification. Fast forward, I still think there is a lot that we can do with cell therapies. A lot of funds, a lot of companies have failed in terms of developing cell therapies, but we still see the benefits of CAR T cells. 98% complete response. We see huge amount of benefit from CAR T cells. There's also a lot of cytokine release storms, a lot of toxicities that are derived from manipulating these cells. And there is a limit on how much we can manipulate these cells. I remember in 2016, 2017, we were doing a lot of manipulations to cells that now we realize it's too much. There is a limit of the type of manipulation that we can do to cells before these cells become exhausted. One of the things that we know now is that when we manipulate these cells, they can do a lot of things that we want them to do, but these cells become less viable. And this aspect of viability of the cell is something that was not fully understood in 2010, 2016. Now we realize this is a big factor. And we still have too long of a period of time, what we call the vein-to-vein timing. It is still too long, but it has created a whole industry of CAR T cells as the most successful aspect class of cell therapies.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. And I think FAARM stands for the Fellowship in Anti-Aging Regenerative and Functional Medicine, and that's a program affiliated with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. We're sure to hear more about that field. I think in some of these new modalities, it's two steps back and one forward, but it's a number of companies are working on it, so I'm excited to see what happens there. All right, we're going to move into your current role now, David, and into 2025. You're, as I mentioned, head of healthcare and life sciences investment banking at Deep World Capital. What are you excited about this year? What kinds of biotech companies or therapeutic areas are you tracking right now, and why?
Yes, I think that 2025, as we can see, will be a time with a lot of fluctuations, a lot of stock variability. We see the index, the variability index going up tremendously. I think that there will be a lot of opportunities for a small cap. I think that for the next 2 3 years, we'll see a lot of M&A. We have seen a big dislocation, geographic dislocation in China. China has more than 3,000 biotech companies, and more we see M&A involved with some of the assets that are being developed in China that want to find a place, a home here in the U.S. with U.S. investors, U.S. patients, clinical trials developed here in the U.S. So we're going to see a lot of these opportunities. There are a lot of therapeutic areas that are coming up that are very interesting. In weight loss, we see the GLP-1s and also other targets that help regenerate the regeneration of the muscle tissue. When we lose weight, we have seen with Ozempic that we also lose muscle tissue, and it's very hard to recover. So it's definitely a problem that many companies and many different companies are coming up with new mechanism of action that preserve muscle tissue while you can lose fat but not the muscle tissue. So we see a lot of interest in this aspect. Fast forward with the success of Lipitor, we saw a lot of patients with a benefit in that therapeutic class. Now we look for, when we look at 2035, I think that we're going to see a society that will benefit from these therapies where you can manage your muscle tissue better. The more muscle tissue we have, the better and longer we live. I mean, it's remarkable the difference that you see in mortality between two sets of population. If you exercise every day and you have a muscle tissue well developed, you have a 500 time lower probability of death at age 80 and 90. So you will see probably in the next generation of therapies how we paid a lot more attention to the musculoskeletal tissue and how to help individuals stay longer and fit rather than just reducing fat. So I think that from that aspect, I think we're going to see tremendous benefits. Cardiovascular system and cancer are still the number 1 and 2 causes of death. There is a lot of new technologies that we're going to see in cancer. The biggest opportunity that I see in cancer is probably the T-cell engagers. Nobody saw 10 years ago T-cell engagers were very difficult to manage. Nobody saw that basically if you use T-cell engagers in a small amount at the beginning and then you increase the dose after a week or two, your body has greater tolerance. And this is what happens with when you design these clinical trials. It was brilliant by a clinician that saw the benefit of T-cell engagers. Every T-cell engager was failing, but they didn't realize that if you dose it in a small amount, you can lower the toxicity. So we can see now a huge uptake on T-cell engagers. I think there is still room for cell therapies. I'm a big evangelist and a big believer that there is more that we can do with cell therapies. And I think that the biggest name now is the bispecific monoclonal antibodies. They have a bispecific type of functionality. I come from the world of monoclonal antibodies, and we saw already in the beginning of 2000, the bispecific was something that the FDA was already pushing at that time. Now it's becoming more and more a standard. And last but not least, the antibody drug conjugates is another class that has been phenomenal. I mean, you can target tumors with a payload of toxic agents to kill only the cancer cells and preserve healthy cells. So that is something that I'm a big believer that radiotherapeutics will become very, very interesting. Novartis, for instance, is very interested in radiotherapeutics, and that the conjugation of monoclonal antibodies with radiotherapeutic agents with isotopes will become more interesting. As of now, isotopes and radiotherapeutics have only worked with peptides because you wanted this quick release of the radiotherapeutic of the isotopes. You wanted to basically have activity very short period of time and then release it. Now we can see how this may be changing with monoclonal antibodies and an isotope that can target only the cells that you want and alpha particles that have more that we can control better. Alpha particles is the next step in radiotherapeutics, and the combination with monoclonal antibodies that can recognize only cancer cells, it makes it for a game changer. So as you can see, Ben, there are so many that it's I feel very fortunate to be in the place of financing and looking at all different landscape of technologies that are truly remarkable. And the science keeps expanding. That's what I like about science. As I told you from the beginning, science is unlimited. You can always find science to do many different aspects, and it provides for a lot of different investment opportunities that will be very, very successful.
Yeah, and I think we could spend the rest of the show talking about any one of those therapeutic areas or modalities. You really hit the nail on the head with that on some of the ones that that I've been watching and that are generating a lot of excitement. I want to try to connect two threads from your just previous comment. One on the patent cliff and the need for companies to bring new molecules in, under their development, into their development engines. And then two, what you were saying about China. Political shifts happen during a change of administration, always creates a degree of uncertainty. Given the impact of policy changes on investment activity and global economic relationships, what can you say about the kind of current and short-term future state of biotech investing in the context of China? And I guess what I'm asking is, given this need to refill pipelines and given the amount of companies you referenced in China, and then thirdly, on top of that, the political landscape, China has become something of a watchword politically in the U.S. What what risks and what opportunities exist for pharma companies that want to work with Chinese companies?
It's a very difficult question, and we still don't know. I mean, obviously, what we do know is that the amount of tariffs will increase. What we do know is that all these CDMOs that were very successful in China. I mean, I still remember when I was at Novartis, we were sending a lot of our manufacturing to China, and one of the things that was very prevalent back in the year 2000 is that that situation where we saw chemical engineers in China to have they were much better prepared than chemical engineers in Europe, and it made economic sense at that time to send a lot of the manufacturing to China, and a lot of pharma companies develop manufacturing in China. Fast forward, this has created a problem of the U.S. becoming less competitive, Europe becoming less competitive, and now kind of repurposing some of the processes to go back to the U.S. I think it will be very difficult. We're talking about 20 years of outsourcing these technologies to China. I don't think that anybody benefits from this disruption. You saw now WuXi in China had to divest all the CDMO, the clinical manufacturing business. And you see a lot of U.S. companies not being able to use these CDMOs in China anymore. So I think it's a massive dislocation in terms of corporate development. It makes things more difficult because, again, we have spent 20 years transferring technology to China for the benefit of production, the benefit of patients, for the benefit of creating more efficiencies. And now is the opposite. And this is a major change. It's a big disruption. We will have to go step by step. I mean, obviously, things will get more expensive, and that's. I mean, obviously, it doesn't favor. It's not favorable for the U.S. to have all this expertise to be outsourced. And now it's a reset. It's a calibration of 20 years of a trend to utilize economies of a scale globally, and now retrenching to nationalize and to basically bring technologies back to the U.S. And also for European markets, it's the same situation. They have to rethink the whole business model to reinvest in technologies back in Europe.
What about just in terms of pure M&A of Chinese companies? Do you see any real risk or opportunity there?
Yes, I mean, that's what we see now. These 3,000 biotech companies in China have very limited access to funding right now. And
Right.
this has happened in Korea. This is happening now in China. It has happened already before in Japan. These biotech companies had easier access to capital than now. Now these biotech companies cannot raise funds anymore. So it is the natural process for these companies to seek a licensing and to seek for acquisitions here in the U.S. and Europe. So it's not secret that big competitors of mine are setting up shop in China for the purpose of getting first hands on these assets. There are tons of assets available in China that can be developed in the U.S., can be developed in Europe, and there will be a lot of licensing opportunities, a lot of M&A opportunities. And it's always the same difficulty when you have to evaluate a Chinese company. You always need to have a Chinese team to understand the language, to validate all the data. Because one of the problems that we encounter with a lot of clinical trials done in China is that they don't have the same protocols. They don't have the same standards of data quality. That there were a lot of concerns, even with audited financials done in China. They did not come out to be the same quality or the same standards as you would expect from U.S. companies.
Right. And kind of keeping on this line of funding and not specific to China, but you in a previous conversation, David, you said science is unlimited. And you referenced some of the most promising areas and areas that people are very excited about: drug developers, patients, investors. But the limiting factor, as I recall, was science is unlimited, people and money are not. So how can scientifically promising young companies in 2025 keep themselves capitalized in this environment where there's so many things to chase, but an unlimited amount of people and resources available? What options, kind of good, bad, and ugly, do they have to choose from?
Yes, you're right. The limiting rate factor is funding and people. These are the two limiting resources. And in the history of humanity, we have had this situation many times before. Remember 2020, 2002, we had limitations of funding, very expensive money. 2008, we had a big recession. So I think as of now, there have been a lot of changes in the financial industry. There will be some difficulties. There will be a limitation of funding. So a lot of companies will need to make hard decisions, and a lot of programs will need to be put on the shelf. And this has happened all the time. There will be a lot of recalibration of priorities. And this also keeps the system healthy in terms of looking for the best assets that can perform, and recalibrating the areas of research and areas of funding. So I don't think it's different that we have seen in the past. We have seen this type of geographic dislocations before, and it will be a good year. I mean, 2025 is a year that has been characterized as a year with a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I mean, I think right now licensing is up fronts are up as well. You're anticipating a good year for M&A, but thinking about smaller companies who, maybe need to get a trial recruited, need to kick off a phase 2 trial, need to maybe pay someone to manufacture a larger amount of product for a larger clinical trial. What new options or maybe existing options are out there that you would maybe recommend or recommend against?
Yes, I think that a lot of companies will need to recalibrate, trim the fat, look for a lot of collaborations, and try to find new ways of developing, especially manufacturing. A lot of the manufacturing is relocated to the US. The US needs to catch up with 20 years of globalization and sending manufacturing to other countries. There is still good relationship with India. India, especially the area of Hyderabad, would be one of the big winners. And I think that a lot of pharma companies still have other places. China is not the only place, and there are other places where even pharma companies have historically developed to precisely have always 2 or 3 different sites of manufacturing that are not correlated. If something happens in China, you need to have another facility in India. So definitely, there's no doubt in my mind that there are many other places that business will continue. Development of manufacturing will be also done in other parts of the world that are more friendly to democracy and more respectful to the IP, patent protection laws. So there will be business will continue. Definitely, there is a disruption now because of geopolitical situations with China. This will continue with this administration for the time being, and we'll have to continue with more CDMOs relocated here in the U.S. and Europe, and others in other geographic areas like Mexico and India.
Thinking about small biotechs in particular, in the very early stages of research and development, what do you anticipate in terms of the public market situation? And are there any kind of alternative investment tools that could be useful? We've spoken about micro IPOs in a previous conversation.
Yes, I think that the micro IPO space is a space that I personally very strong about it. I still think that there is a lot of opportunities for companies to go public on a small amount of offerings, anywhere from 10 to $15 million offerings, and are manageable. And what we have seen, and I think we had this conversation before, a big increase of transactions with private equity funds. I think that one of the biggest differences, one of the areas that are growing faster are these transactions with private equity funds, with royalty funds. We have seen an increase on what we call the synthetic royalties. These are royalties before these are licensed with another commercial entity. So there are like 3 or 4 pockets of financing that are definitely different from 10 years, 20 years ago, that are growing. You did not see private equity funds involved in preclinical, pre-revenue transactions, and now that is something that is coming more and more. This concept of the synthetic royalty almost didn't exist 20 years ago, and now you can see at least 10% of all transactions royalty involved, royalty piece, way before it goes commercial. So definitely there are more structures that we see of interest. We see a lot of structure financing with warrants that when the stock goes up and you have good data, all of a sudden you can realize a very good transaction with the warrants you already have. If you have $8 million now in warrants and your stock goes up because you have good data on a phase 2 trial, it's a fantastic day because you can monetize this data. The company can raise money, investors make do well, and definitely I'm a big believer that there is a room for this type of transaction. When I talk to CEOs, they don't like warrants for all the good reasons. But at the same time, it provides a structure financing that when things go well, and if you believe you're a strong believer on that clinical trial to be successful, then you can have a very successful situation with rising the stock of the price of the stock and being allowing to monetize all these warrants. So I think that we will see, to your point, we'll see more structured deals with different instruments. Warrants are not going to go away. We'll see a lot of transaction with this kind of warrants, and it's a space that is rapidly moving. I think within the next 24 months, the price of money will get more expensive, and there will need to have more structured deals in place.
Can you give us a read at all on the private equity investment strategy? And I guess what I'm thinking about is there a kind of herd mentality where private equity is attracted to a certain size and even a therapeutic area, or is it sort of all over the map at this point?
Yes, I mean, in private equity, you see a lot of transactions that a lot of companies can raise two, three, $400 million in Series A, B, and C, and this is happening every day. I mean, we just saw an artificial intelligence company led by RG Ventures in Chicago. They raised 1 billion. So you see transactions now that I never saw before on the private equity space and VC private equity space that they're very deep pockets. They can deploy tons of funding. A lot of transactions now that I didn't anticipate 10 years ago are actually private placements, Series A, Series B, Series C, that you can deploy easily $100 million to $100 million.
And as someone, who likes to work with CEOs, likes to advise CEOs, and this may be an impossible question to answer because the facts in any given case will differ from one to the next, but are there things that you would advise a CEO who is kind of, as a very promising early stage development candidate, needs to move into, say, a phase 2 trial? Are there any particular instruments that you would really caution on, or just, do an extra degree of due diligence on before recommending that as an option to a CEO, or not?
I think that every time I talk to CEOs, I try to bring a perspective in terms of the competitive landscape. I always spend time with the CEOs to give them a landscape, to give them comparables. I think that it's very important for CEOs to understand where they are, understand what is the landscape, and have a reality check on their comparables, on the valuations. And I think that this will be more and more the case, that we will need to look at the comparables, we need to look at the valuation, and for companies to have a reality check in terms of where to continue investing and when to give up, when to basically not abandon an asset, but to have the courage not to continue with certain assets or certain type of therapeutic areas. Your question was mostly about what type of structures to avoid. I think that an early stage, you want to avoid any type of debt. In other words, debt most of the times becomes a spiral death. And if you are an early stage company, phase 1, phase 2, you will have opportunities to issue debt. But then the question is, how are we going to repay 6 months, 9 months, 12 months after the debt has been issued. Um, there are instruments that we call data spiral. That is the last resource. But I would say this is probably where you need to be more careful.
Excellent. David, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share that perhaps you think are important for our listeners to think about and that maybe I haven't asked you about?
Yes, I think that moving forward, I think that what we're going to see is more collaboration among different banks. I think that we see in the financial industry where we collaborate, and you see more and more transactions where you have two, three, four, even five banks involved. So I think that moving forward, we are going to see more and more of these collaborative type of efforts more than sharp elbows to basically hold on to your own transaction. I think that we all benefit from working together. The more collaborative we are, the more we can do well for our clients, for our investors, and we can do more transactions. So I look forward to 2025 to do more collaborative type of transactions and to meet as many new technologies as we can.
That's David Sands, Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences Investment Banking at D. Boral Capital. I'm Ben Comer, and you've just listened to the Business of Biotech. Find us and subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out new weekly video casts of these conversations every Monday under the Listen and Watch tab at lifescienceleader.com. We'll see you next week, and thank you for listening.